А тепер хочемо поділитися з нашими глядачами приємною новиною про американського громадянина українського походження, який довший час боровся за справедливість та честь його імені.
In early 1976, the Israeli Police Nazi Crime Investigation Division received a collection of 17 photographs from the United States Immigration and Naturalization Service, the INS. The 17 photographs were of Ukrainians living in the United States who were suspected of Nazi crimes. The Israelis were asked to find witnesses in Israel who were able to tell more about these Ukrainians and who could possibly identify them in the photo spread. One of the photos was that of John Demjanjuk, a Ukrainian who obtained his U.S. citizenship after the Second World War. Demjanjuk was accused of being the notorious Nazi war criminal Ivan the Terrible of Treblinka. On June 23, 1981, John Demjanjuk was stripped of his U.S. citizenship and on February 28, 1986, was extradited to Israel. His conviction was based largely on the eyewitness testimony of a few survivors of Treblinka who had managed to escape in the summer of 1943. The 6th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Cincinnati previously ruled that the Justice Department's Office of Special Investigations, the OSI, had used fraud in its initial case against Mr. Demjanjuk.
They asked the Justice Department in a letter to explain these allegations raised by the defense of Mr. Demjanjuk, and they refused to answer the court. On June 5th, of course, they reopened the entire proceeding to see if Mr. Demjanjuk's extradition to Israel was based on erroneous information.
Last week, U.S. District Judge Paul Mattia agreed there was evidence that the office possessed facts in 1981 that could have been used in Mr. Demjanjuk's defense, but kept them from him.
Mr. Demjanjuk's defense was denied all the evidence that the Department of Justice knew in 1978 that Ivan the Terrible was somebody else, yet they proceeded to prosecute him for something, not that they thought he might be, but prosecute him for something that he knew he was not. And this is a very serious violation of Mr. Demjanjuk's civil rights, and I think that the court will find in our favor.
On April 25, 1988, a Jerusalem court sentenced John Demjanjuk to death for crimes against humanity, including the slaughter of 850,000 Jews in the Treblinka gas chamber.
I think it's tremendously damaging to the state of Israel. They put a wrong man on trial, convicted him, sentenced him to death, who's clearly not the guy. I mean, everybody sees that they got the wrong man, and it behooves Israel to release him and say they made a mistake. It seems to me the only way they can sort of atone for what was done to an innocent man.
His conviction was overturned on appeal, and in 1993 the Israeli Supreme Court ruled Mr. Demjanjuk was not Ivan the Terrible and freed him after 7 years in prison. Since returning to the United States in 1993, John Demjanjuk sought to restore his citizenship.
Politics has been what has carried this case for the last 16 years, and now the politics it's over with, and it's time for justice, and this is what we're driving for.
Finally, last Friday, justice was served when federal judge Paul Mattia restored the U.S. citizenship of John Demjanjuk.
Firstly, I think it's great news. It's evidence of the fact that the justice system does work, that after an incredibly long battle, after a 17-year fight in the courts, both in the United States and in Israel, the truth is prevailing, that not only has John Demjanjuk been found not guilty in Israel when I defended him, but that his slowly but surely he's being brought back to the same position that he was before this horror and before this tragedy commenced.
Ви знаєте, не тільки, що пана Демjanjuka вернули, не повісили, вернули до Америки, а тепер йому віддали громадянство. Я думаю, що ми всі дуже тяжко працювали, але ніхто з нас не думав, що таки йому віддадуть.
In an official memorandum of opinion and order of the U.S. District Court, Northern District of Ohio, the court made several findings, including the OSI attorneys acted with reckless disregard for their duty to the court and their discovery obligations.
Not only have they acted recklessly with respect to the truth, that is disregarding the truth, but there was a finding of fraud on the court in John Demjanjuk's extradition case. That is very serious. That is potentially explosive. Who was in charge at that time? Who was giving the orders? Who was responsible? Because the buck has to stop somewhere.
In his order, Judge Mattia continued to write, accordingly, defendant John Demjanjuk's motion to set aside the judgment of this court dated June 23, 1981, will be granted. It is so ordered. The court also ruled that this case be dismissed without prejudice.
Well, regrettably, it means that he closed the door to this particular denaturalization proceeding. In other words, he reversed it, and John Demjanjuk today, as we speak, he's a United States citizen with all the rights that accrues to that particular status. However, the United States government can still, the door is open for them to reinstate or to recommence proceedings, fresh proceedings or new proceedings to denaturalize him, not as Ivan the Terrible, because he was found definitively, beyond the shadow of any doubt, not guilty of that crime or crimes, but of lesser crimes, that he was a guard at some camp, so that they can still recommence proceedings. My feeling is, my opinion is that I don't think they'll do this.
Пана Демjanjuka перепитано перед тим, як він мав бути в Треблінці, за Собибор, за все інше. І вони нічого не знайшли, і тому вони пішли до Треблінки. Тепер вертатися, я хочу, щоб це раз назавжди було ясно, нема куди, бо його вже перепитано про все.
Next week, Kontakt will bring you more on the legal implications of the Demjanjuk case and how they shed a negative light on Canada's denaturalization approach to war criminals.
For generations, this generations back and generations forward, this case is going to show that when individuals become advocates of a cause rather than seekers of justice, the whole system can go haywire. I think that in the long run, the continued prosecution of alleged war criminals in the United States and around the world, it's going to be severely harmed by the unscrupulous acts of the Department of Justice in the case against Mr. Demjanjuk, and that's their own fault. I mean, we didn't ask for this case. They charged him, and in the long run, they will have proven wrong 16 years too late.
Далі в програмі «Коза дереза у Вінніпезі» і «Є в нас воля».